In this week's Roleplay Geeks, things start sideways and work from there as we discuss collecting and role-playing games. Steve-O and Jim forget audio is not a visual medium. Traveler takes center stage. Steven argues this collecting isn't actually collecting. And assassins! Ha! Good God, y'all! What are they good for? Absolutely nothing, Steve-O says again! All on this week's episode of Roleplay Geeks.
And now for a quick announcement. Roleplay Geeks has a contest running through July 6th, 2020. For a 4 Horsemen t-shirt, a set of Dungeons & Dragons Martial and Racist spell cards, and a set of blue gaming dice. You can enter by heading over to the contest page at roleplaygeeks.com or by following the contest links on our social media channels. And now, back to the podcast.
Hello, welcome to Roleplay Geeks. This is your host, Frank.
This is your token hippie, John.
Oh, am I next? This is Jim.
Yes.
I'm Jim. Stop laughing at me, man. I can never remember the order.
I thought I should go after Steve. Yeah, right, and I'm the other Steve.
Let's try this all again.
Okay, all right. So, I will, from now on, remind everybody their order, because that way...
By pointing at us.
Moronic. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Hello, and welcome to Roleplay Geeks. This is Frank.
This is your token hippie, John.
This is Jim.
Jesus Christ. It's just...
What are you laughing about? What is remotely funny?
It's just nothing. Nothing. Do it again. Oh.
They can't keep a straight face because all the other ones are fake.
Okay. I'm just not going to look at the screen.
I don't think you can do a mime episode because Jimmy will crack up laughing. So there's just silence and then Jimmy laughing and giggling for an hour and a half.
Okay. As long as I don't look at you guys, I'm all right. Let's do it again. Get this ball rolling.
Hello and welcome to Roleplay Geeks. This is Frank.
This is your token hippie, John.
I can't. I sit there thinking to myself, don't laugh. Damn it. And I'm Jim. Just edit around it.
I'm Steve. And this is the other Steve.
That's just going to have to do.
It's going to be
it's just
the
gonna
best.
Have to do. We're never going to get through it if we don't just plow ahead.
This week we're going to talk about something a little different than what we have normally. In the past, we've typically talked about, playing role-playing in some form or fashion. And this is a little more about the material parts of role-playing, which is, the items themselves, the books, the dice, the miniatures, all the flotsam and jetsam that we actually use in the real world when we're making these games in our mind. And I was kind of intrigued by this. This is a topic that Jimmy put out in our list of topics, and I thought was kind of neat, which is, the idea of collecting these role-playing games. Now, I know that all of us have had role-playing games in the past, and we've obviously been doing it long enough that some of the things we have are quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Ancient, decrepit, much like your hosts. And it's an intriguing thought to me because I'm not sure any of us per se, I mean, maybe Steven, have really collected with an eye to collecting of role-playing games, yet we've kind of developed a collection. So, I don't know, just throw that out there, see what you guys think about collecting role-playing games.
I don't collect role-playing games.
I find that highly unlikely. And if you had a video feed, you would be seeing Jimmy pulling out like all kinds of ancient box sets of Traveler, Striker, so
Jimmy, you have a specific collection for the most part, I think, which is a heavy focus on Traveler, right?
Oh, yeah. I even got this Traveler Aid Society stuff. Traveler Aid Society. Great stuff.
So that goes all the way back to the first edition, or what?
Yeah. It was sort of like Dragon Magazine was for Dungeons & Dragons. It's the Traveler's Aid Society. There's Steve-O with his Dungeon Magazine, or his Dragon Magazine.
Dragon. He's showing a Dragon Magazine. So
Dragon and White Dwarf, yeah.
So some of this is kind of a conversation about the sort of history of role-playing games at some level. So as most people know, Dungeons & Dragons was arguably certainly the first mainstream role-playing game. And it goes back to the early 70s with Chainmail. Is that the name of the game?
That's right.
Yeah. So unfortunately, we're in an audible medium. You can't see the sheer volume of things that are being flashed on the screen by Steve and James for aids that are put out there. But once the concept of role-playing games were sort of accepted by the mainstream nerd media, there was an explosion of a lot of different games over the years. And so TSR, which was the original inventors of Dungeons & Dragons, they put out a lot of different genres of games. So Jimmy showed Star Frontiers. That's a great example of something he has a copy of. Steve Hill showed Gamble World, which was that the original, Steve?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's hard to actually call that a collector's item because, I mean, I bought it when it was current.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of this is there's two parts of this, right? So there's the stuff we've accumulated, for lack of a better term, instead of necessarily collected. And then there's stuff that maybe we bought because we like the items themselves. And there's been a lot of games out there in the history, and we've touched on a lot of them. So having shown the rest of the Roleplay Geeks the sheer plethora of stuff that they have sitting on their desk, why don't you talk our listeners through some of the things that you have, James and Steve?
Well, we're not the only ones. I think Mara's probably got the biggest collection hidden somewhere in the shelves in his basement.
Astonishingly, you'd be wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I just grabbed a few select items, a variety. For myself, I wouldn't say I really collect a whole lot. Most of my collection, and I'm like Jimmy, is Traveler. I've always loved the game, and every new edition that comes out, I generally try to buy everything that's out there, even though I don't use everything. Sometimes I buy, for instance, this is actually not put out by Mark Miller or GDW or Far Future Enterprises, and it's just a Starship collection that I picked up because I have my own universe when I run Traveler, my own world, but I like using their supplements for ships and weapons and all that kind of stuff. So I don't use the Spinward Marches or the Solomati Rim. I have my own mapped out universe and political system and all that kind of stuff. So, but I use their rules and their supplements, so I don't have to make up everything.
Yeah, I think Traveler's the only thing I intentionally collect. Everything is just things like the rest of the guys that I accumulate. But I go out of my way to buy the Traveler stuff.
I ended up getting one that I have, and it was the first con we went to. I was able to get a hardback with a nice slipcover of the original Mark Miller Traveler. It was a hardback, and I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, now that was probably from Mega Traveler then.
No.
Was it?
It was the original Mark Miller Traveler.
Oh, Mark Miller's Traveler. That's from the mid-'90s because that's what this is from.
No. This was from, because we went to that con in like 88 or 87, something like that. So it would have predated that.
It was, it's like the original, was it Book 0 and Book 1 or whatever, but it's all in one hardback.
Oh, okay.
And,
yeah, I've got one, but I think Jack has it.
This guy was selling it, and I was really interested in it. And I kind of kept looking at it, and I looked at some other stuff, and I came back. And he was busy talking to somebody else, and finally asked what the price was. And his wife was like, oh, $20.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to get it, because we'd really started playing it a lot with you. And so I went ahead and grabbed it. And when I'd handed her the money and stuff, and she handed it to me, and she was getting me a bag to put it in, and he's like, oh, you bought that and stuff. I said, yeah, I thought it was $20, and he looked like his head was going to explode. Like, no, what did you do, woman? So it was kind of bizarre. But
do you remember what was in that book? It was the original 3 from the box set.
Yeah.
And then, did it have High Guard and Mercs in it?
No, it didn't have any of the other stuff. It was just the
original 3 in a hardback.
I think it had it might have had the module, because I think there was 2 books and then a module in the original box.
Oh, wow.
Well, I actually think it has 3 adventures at the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, I have the original box set that I bought when it came out back in the day, and I have almost all the original books, and I have quite a few of the original copies of the Traveler's Day Society, the journal. But then around 2000, Far Future Enterprises put out these reprints, and so I was able to complete my collection of everything from the original classic Traveler. And I was going to ask you, is yours signed by Mark Miller? I noticed on and when I opened this one up today, I was looking at it, and he actually signed it. Said Bon Voyage, Mark Miller, June 10th, 2003. I thought that was pretty cool.
I just pulled mine off the shelf here. Which page is it on?
It's on you just open it right up, and it's on the very first thing there.
Nope. Mine is not signed. Is yours signed?
I wonder how I got this signed copy. It's interesting.
Wait, is it you just writing Mark Miller's name
No.
down? This would be
Mark
worse
Miller
on
realized-
one day.
Maybe he's like, hey, it's that Steve guy that buys every single thing I put out. Let me sign this one personally for him. I mean, I sent him a check for all of the stuff in the 90s that I bought, literally.
I think
it was just to him.
When that stuff first came out, if you bought the first X number of copies, they were signed. So you must have got in early or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or just got
Pretty
lucky.
cool, though.
Yep.
So, what do you think makes the two of you, move to collect that much about Traveler? I mean, there's certainly more material of similar quality and abilities out there about, say, Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. But do you think if you were more interested in that genre, you would be moved to buy all those things for it, or is it just something about Traveler?
For me, it's something about Traveler. I mean, there's a lot of other science fiction games, but there's a lot. There's just a lot of material out there for that game. And I have all the Mongoose stuff too, which is the more current version, I guess. But often if there's a store where I'm out of town and I'll see a game shop, I'll go in and I'll see what they have. I mean, I've grabbed a few Dungeons and Dragons books and modules. I actually buy quite a few modules here and there. I don't usually use them, but I like to get ideas from them and maps from them sometimes. So I've got quite a collection of just little one-off modules, things like that, just for ideas and maps.
Yeah.
So yeah, John's got this weird thing. He doesn't actually have it. It's at my house, but those little modules that he bought that were like, I don't know, pamphlets. I mean, little tiny things that he purchased that were kind of cool. I never seen anything like that, and they were just sort of like one shots almost.
Yeah, I got some of those.
Inches wide, 11 inches, so it's like a sheet of regular paper just folded in two and made into a pamphlet kind of thing. And yeah, exactly like that. It's they're like 4 by 11.
They're map size.
Yeah, they're really kind of neat because they've got, when you get into them, then they've got, I think I bought 2 of them. And both of them have like some new monsters and stuff in them. And I got them for the same reason. I wanted them like for the some maps or some new monsters to have, some ideas, that sort of stuff. I thought they were very cool.
But nothing for the sake of collecting.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
The only thing I got for the sake of collecting was the Mark Miller Traveler hardback. Now that I've been very proud of, if you want to call it that. So, but I mean, who can I be proud to? It's like to you guys. You guys are like, oh yeah, that's really cool.
It's like, oh my God, how much you want for it?
Right? Yeah, what am I going to do? To show it off to you guys, like, oh yeah, bikini model it or something, around the room. I mean, seriously, when you're collecting stuff, it's mainly for your own edification. So,
that's a good.
Yeah, for the most part, this topic is terrible. None of us collect. It's just about us talking about crap we've accumulated. It's like the Porter show.
Okay, so that's a good point. Let's talk about the term collecting. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons that you may collect something. One is for monetary value. So you may collect something on the hope as an investment on the hope that you can return some profit on it in some way or some form. I think it's fair to say that nobody associated at any level with this podcast does that with role-playing games.
Who does that with role-playing games? These things are
I
worth
don't want to
nothing.
make I don't want to make the categorical assumption that doesn't happen anywhere, because some nerd somewhere will go, well, actually, I have this that I bought, So
does he push his glasses up like you do?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm not going to presume. I'm not even presuming it's a he. Anyway,
he's so woke.
Yeah. So anyway, but I think that is probably represents a very small minority of the role-playing collecting group of nerds out there. The second is that you can collect something because you just like it and it's interesting and it makes you happy in some level. So I think the obvious stereotypical example I think of, my Aunt Peggy used to collect cows for her kitchen. So little things that were cows, like put in her kitchen.
Oh, okay, not real cows.
Yeah, no, just little.
That's called being a farmer.
Right. So it's a thing that you can collect because you just find it interesting. And I'm not sure that any of us necessarily collect in that way, but I think we all have items that we could say we bought because of that reason.
I think Mara collects T-shirts of nerd stuff.
I'm specifically talking about role-playing things, given the topic of the podcast. Because if we were talking about general collecting for collecting's sake, there's lots of things.
Well, I mean, a lot of his shirts are role-playing stuff. Like the Call of Cthulhu one he wore last time.
Right.
That was a reach out to you to interject there, Steve.
Oh.
Prove me wrong, woman.
I don't collect T-shirts.
Could have fooled me.
What are you wearing? Do you collect anything? Is there anything game related that you do collect, Stephen?
No.
He's gonna be useless for this episode.
Okay, but if you, I keep things.
Well, let me get the last definition, so then we can talk more broad. And the last definition is stuff that I think the better word instead of collecting is accumulating. So we bought because we want to use it in our games, or we like the idea of playing that game, and now we have it. So we have a collection, but the reason for accumulating that or acquiring, that's a better word there, that item is for gaming specifically, not necessarily to collect. All right, so sorry to interrupt you there, Steve. Go ahead.
Mara.
Yes.
Were you even listening?
No, I'm listening. So if I had the ability to get all of the BattleTech technical readouts with all the different mechs for clans, Inner Sphere, all that stuff, the ones that were horizontally along format, for those of you who remember those.
Three of us are nodding, and Steve-O's just sitting there with a blank stare in his face.
I don't know what he's talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. If I could find a collection of those, I would buy them and treasure them. But I don't specifically, buy anything for the collection. The only things
get some if you want them.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wish.
You can go get them.
I know.
You get shot.
I know.
You would.
Or a cat thrown at you.
Depends on how fast you move.
A three-legged cat thrown at you.
That's a little bit obtuse for our listeners, so we'll touch on that in a minute, but go ahead, Steve.
Yeah. So the only, and here's a little divergence in what happened with me compared to, say, Steve-O and Jim, is that in 94, I started playing Magic. So my nerd dollars went down a completely different path. And I wasn't buying things to collect, and I wasn't buying things because, I like the art or I like, this or that. I was buying things to make myself better at a game. And so over the years, I have sold my collections of Magic cards, and I've given collections of Magic cards away to other people. But the whole reason for me accumulating those is very, very different than buying source book materials and things like that.
Well, in a lot of ways, it's pretty much the same. I mean, the reason that Steve and Jimmy have collected all their Traveler stuff is, for the most part, because they want to be better at playing Traveler. They want to enjoy playing Traveler because they want to pull in all the supplemental information. So it's not radically dissimilar, just different game system.
I disagree just a little bit because, honestly, I mean, I've bought every version of Traveler just because I love the game and I love the artwork, the universe. I buy it because and especially the older stuff that, like a couple of I didn't have a couple of the issues of Traveler's Aid Society. So, that's where those reprints came in handy, things like that. It's just because I wanted them. I mean, I would say,
but Jimmy.
Jimmy, what?
No, I said, then what?
That's exactly
my
the
statement
same.
Doesn't.
Exactly the same as Steve-O. Some of the stuff I bought because I wanted to get more material for the game, but some of it I bought just to have it, like that the Mark Miller's Traveler. I think it's T4 stuff.
Yeah.
The pictures in it are pretty, but Steve-O and I were talking about this, and it just isn't representative of the classic Traveler universe. But they're pretty science fiction pictures. The actual game itself wasn't really good. I mean, the rule set wasn't great. And I always went back to classic Traveler until Mongoose Traveler came out.
And the printing on the inside of that book is
terrible.
All of them. It's very cheap or something. It's very dark. The black and white artwork is just terrible. And they based the rules around an artist that had already created the artwork that did not match anything that had previously come out before. So, I mean, I have them all, but
yeah, same here.
It's not something. I mean, I pulled one out just to show you guys today, but I mean, it's not something that I look at or really use.
Okay, so I'm wrong about Steve and Jimmy, but I will say in my particular case, it's not any different. I don't think I've only bought one game ever for collectible sake. The only reason I ever buy any of my supplements or information is to play the game better. And if it doesn't help me play the game better, I get rid of it. I have no interest in it. So the way that you collected Magic the Gathering, Stephen, is not radically different than the way that I collect my supplement information in Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it may be. The only game that I ever bought because I wanted it, and it's just nostalgia, was the original Gamma World, which I bought that off of eBay, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that, because of nostalgia, because the first game I ever played was Dungeons and Dragons, but the second was Gamma World that John and I played. And I just wanted that for nostalgia, and we've never played it. I don't think the last time we played it, Reagan was president. And so I don't think we've ever touched the copy I bought. And I don't ever expect to, but that is the only thing. Everything else is just for playing the game better. And either it helps me do that or it doesn't.
Well, like my hardback, Traveler, I mean, I got it so that we could play Traveler, because at the time when we started playing was with Steve-O. And
he was the only one with the books.
Right. And so I thought, well, this way we'll have, I'll have another set of books, we'll have it to do. And I think I ended up getting, what was it, High Guard, book 4.
That's book 5.
Those book 4 is the one that I got. The one from Marines and that sort of stuff.
Mercenary, that's
the one.
Hey, John, was your favorite part about owning the books? So you had them yourself, right? And could look through at all the cool-ass equipment you could possibly get for the first 5 minutes of the adventure before you lost it?
Right, pretty much, yeah.
I'm sorry, what game did he play where that was true, that he had it for 5 minutes?
Okay,
well,
that
first one, the time
5 minutes, but
minute and a half, 2 minutes tops.
You guys can get whatever you want. Just go ahead and put it on your sheet, and then you lost all your stuff.
But use a pencil.
Yeah. So I mean, I had mine. Specifically, I got it for that, not for the collectibility. I mean, I kind of thought about that when I bought it, because I was like, oh, that's hardcover, and it still had the slip cover on it. And
Steve-O's Adventures. My character just wants a change of underwear and a hat. That's all I want.
Yeah, you lost your change of underwear, buddy.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was nice to have that, to be able to play. But now that I've got it, and how big of a deal the guy made that I got it so cheap from his wife, I was like, well, I'm not going to let go of this. And of course, I've had it for, God almighty, 28
years,
a
30
spell.
years, something like that.
Yeah,
I've had it
piece.
for
a long time.
Yeah, I bought mine off of eBay, and it looks like the guy used it as a coffee filter, so it's not in great shape. You can read most of the pages. I need to go back and actually collect. Haha, see what I did there, Frank? I need to go back and add to my collection a better copy of that, see if I can track it down.
The only other thing
But-
that I really have, personally, is I still have a couple of my old D&D books. Like, I've got my Dungeon Master's Guide, and I think I got my Player's Handbook, but I don't even know where they are. But the thing is, now when we play 5th edition. And when we play Traveler, I don't play the original Traveler. We play, the latest Mongoose, I think, versions, the ones that we play generally now. We don't really, use that material, so part of me kind of gets do I really need this stuff anymore? Maybe I can make some money on, eBay off of it, get it out of here, and somebody else can enjoy it and covet it, and then, parade around in front of their friends in a bikini outfit, doing a cute little modeling thing or something, and freak their friends out. So,
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah, I had the I can't remember if it was third or 3.5 edition of D&D. I had a lot. I had 2 players' handbooks, and I had several books, and I just sold them on eBay because it just was a system that. And I did the same thing with 4th edition. I bought 4th edition, and I just got rid of them because it's not something we'd ever play. Once 5th edition came out, I was like, that's good. We're done. And like you, I have my original 1st edition books that I keep around for nostalgia's sake, but not for collectability's sake per se. So it is kind of interesting. I think it's fair to say that of all of us, Steven is the most likely to collect things.
Or accumulate things.
I don't know what the right term is there. Obviously not game supplements and things like that.
Hoard.
Hoard is the right word.
But
Steven-
he's has the most predilection to collecting things, and he knows a lot about the things he collects, which is a fairly common aspect of collecting. And I'm probably the second most likely, but I don't really know why. For my favorite hobby, I just don't have any real desire to collect them for collectability's sake. But like Steve, I do enjoy supplemental information that I can utilize in my games and say, this is great. I'm wondering how prevalent collecting is in this hobby. And Steven, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you interact with more gamers than we do, or have interacted with more gamers than us.
Multi-generational.
So things like the loot crates and whatnot, Funko figurines, all those things wouldn't be around if there wasn't a huge market for it in nerd culture. And that goes with just being, a movie geek, comic book geek, whatever. Collecting is rampant. And there are kind of 2 different sides to collecting. There is the collecting of things that represent what you do and what you enjoy. And there are things you can collect and accumulate that have a direct impact on your experience with that hobby. So I know some people, and we know one person in particular from our past who just collects everything he could afford in anything that he liked. And he tried to get it all. And so, but there was no way he was ever going to play it all. There was no way in hell he could ever play it all, but he collected it. And then I know people who have, the little big-headed figurines, and they've got, 100 of them in their home, on shelves and everything. I know one guy who collects DC and Marvel action figures. So, it's different. Like what Frank was saying, I think he and I have things because we've accumulated them because they had a purpose for something that we enjoy. And I would very rarely actually seek out buying something in order to have it just to have it. I have one thing that I've been looking for, and I just haven't wanted to spend the money on it because I'm such a, thrift store whore, is the deities and demigods with the Cthulhu mythos in it. That is the one thing that I want. And I just want it to have it. I've got the other one. I just want it to have it. But all the things that I have that seem like a collection, in the room that I'm in right now, I have 5 stereo receivers, 3 equalizers, 2 CD players, 2 tape decks, 3 turntables, 6, 8, 10, 12. I have 16 speakers, but I don't collect them.
You sound like me with music gear, man. I got tons of crap everywhere.
I don't think that word means what you think it means.
That falls under accumulate, I think.
Yes.
Same with me.
Yes. Yeah. It's like last night I was testing the speakers that I refoamed versus another pair that I got. And all the speakers that I have down here have either been free or I've gotten at Salvation Army, Goodwill, or yard sales, all the audio equipment. And I will take things and I will cycle them out. I'll accumulate a couple more turntables and maybe another receiver, and I'll put together a stereo for someone and I'll give it to them. So I don't have the same kind of attachment to these things. I just want the best sounding thing that I can get, and I'm constantly cycling things through. Or at least that used to be the case before pandemic time, because now that it's pandemic time, thrifting is bad, is really bad.
But Goodwill's still open.
Well, it opened last week, as did another. There's a thrift store in the area called the Community Ranch, which is pretty great. They usually have pretty fair prices.
Hey, Frank, real quick. I think I know what it is. It's unintentional collecting. That's the phrase we should use.
Well, I think Frank makes a good point about accumulating, because usually what happens to me is I'll be out of town somewhere and I'll run across a new game shop or something, and I'll go in and I'll just buy a bunch of crap. I bought a game called Fading Suns a few years ago, the hardback books, and I bought several. I've never played it. I read the rules, but I'll go in and it'll be a new store and they'll have new shiny things, and I'll just go in and buy a bunch of it. But I've never once ever sold or given away or threw away anything I've ever bought for role-playing games. So when I broke out just a few items that I have, it's just to show you guys today some variety. But I've got boxes of stuff. I got some stuff in my bookshelf, some stuff just in boxes, like modules and things. But it's just the way I roll, man.
I think it's kind of interesting that arguably the most collectible thing in this hobby are miniatures. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess, except for printed ones, which are a kind of a new thing, but I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that between the 5 of us, we couldn't get more than 2-3 dozen that we have between us?
That is wrong, because Jimmy made some little purchases. Go ahead, Jim.
I have like a crap ton of miniatures. Like,
really?
Yeah, in the
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the early days of eBay, I guess it was probably in the early 2000s, late 90s, somewhere in that. I got into looking for miniatures for Traveler. And a lot of times they would just sell batches of miniatures back in those days for like $15. Here's 80 miniatures. They're all lead, and you can die from licking them. Some people can. I'm still around, baby. But yeah.
Maybe that's why you can never remember what the question was.
So, yeah, I've got a ton of miniatures, like boxes and boxes and boxes of them, but I never bring them out or use them or anything. They're a little dated, and those early pewter and lead miniatures generally don't look as good as the miniatures that are coming out these days. Those resin miniatures and stuff, so I tend to use those. I wouldn't say I collected them other than those Traveler miniatures, and those are really tiny ones. Those are the 15 millimeter scale, which are really tiny, but cool.
I have, when I first got into the hobby, I bought a box of Advanced Dungeons and Dragon miniatures that probably had, I don't know, a dozen, maybe, of different characters, and that was it until, this has probably been 25 years ago. There was a guy that I think had tried to start a hobby store, and he had it in the local trade paper that he was selling a bunch of stuff really cheap. So I drove down to his house, and he was selling, he just, had a bunch of Battletech miniatures. He was selling on the cheap, super cheap. I bought them all. I've still got them, but they're in a box somewhere. They're not out. They're not painted. They're not on display. I don't know why I bought them. Again, it's one of those things where, hey, this is a great deal, man. He only wants $2 for each one of these miniatures, so I bought them all. And I don't even think they've seen the light of day. I don't think I've ever even shown them to anyone or
So they're
got
authentic.
them out. Yeah, I mean, I haven't even gotten. They're still in the pack. I haven't gotten them out and coveted them or anything. So
Wow.
I mean, it's just crap.
You're a closet
that I've
hoarder.
accumulated. So
I'm surprised Mary
You
keeps
know.
you around.
what can I say, man? I love gaming stuff, so I'm just gonna buy it. So if I can afford it.
So I can think of I want to go back just a minute because we alluded to somebody, but for the purpose of this conversation, the thing I thought was kind of interesting is there's a guy that we knew that we met in high school, and he had as Steve said, a very significant collection of things. And I think that may be the first time any of us, maybe not Steve-O, had really experienced the notion of collecting those things. Is that fair? I think I know I can say it's definitely true for me, but is it fair to say?
That. That's a pretty fair assumption.
For sure.
Agreed.
Yeah. So he was the first person I ever met that viewed this hobby through that lens. And I thought it was awesome. I mean, I really, really thought it was awesome at the time. Now I don't as much because it's not something, even with the means, I've obviously gravitated towards. But at the time, I just thought, this is amazing. You've got all this material here. And I remember playing Traveler in Steve-O's campaign, and I wanted to make a spaceship because the original Traveler had rules for making things like robots and cyborgs and spaceships and worlds, and you had to have advanced degrees in multivariate calculus to understand what the hell was going on. So you couldn't just do it there. You had to actually take it home and do stuff. And he let me borrow them, and it was almost like a library. And that was the notion of having this gaming library.
A nerd library.
Was just amazing to me. And I still love the idea, but I don't want it to be in my house.
A nerd berry.
Like an Atlas Obscura for nerd stuff.
I mean, he did have all that stuff. I don't really think it was a collection, though, to tell the truth. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he did it to collect it per se. But yeah, it was an amazing amount of stuff. I mean, he would just go and buy different stuff. We go down to the gaming place that we went to in Blacksburg, Virginia, and he just like, oh, someone go, oh, this looks really kind of neat, and he just grab it, and he'd walk out with like a couple bags full of new gaming systems and supplements and other stuff, and maybe some more dye, and usually like another book for BattleTech or something, and we'd all be just like, whoa. So yeah.
And it was awesome because then we could go back to his place and everybody could enjoy it and play it.
Yeah.
Watch it as he set it on a shelf and we never touched it again. Spycraft. For all you guys out there who were involved in the Spycraft gaming system, I'm sorry, but Jesus, guys, come on. It was a terrible game. Terrible game.
Interesting non sequitur.
Well, I'm scarred. What can I say?
I had a friend also whenever I started gaming that his mom owned a business, and he had plenty of money, and could buy virtually anything he wanted. So yeah, I had a similar experience that he always had a new game system or the new rules and new supplements and all that kind of stuff lying around.
Right.
So it was neat. We always gamed at his place, and we were always playing new games.
He had chainmail. No, not chainmail. Didn't he actually get plate mail?
Oh, you're talking about for the
not the
SCA
game. He's
stuff.
talking about the
Exactly,
real a real suit of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we were in the SCA,
Yeah.
Society for Creative Anachronism. So real nerddom there, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's like classy LARPing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that some other day.
So I do have a friend, Jennifer, and Jennifer loves anime, the royal family, and White Wolf games. And anytime there is a new edition of, say, Mage, or one of the White Wolf titles that she loves, she buys it. There was a Kickstarter, maybe two, the past few years, where they brought out special editions of the books. She bought them, and she brought one of them to show me, and it's really neat. And she showed me pictures of the other one. And it's not because it was necessarily something that she was sure she was going to play, but it was something that she cherished and she coveted. And much like the version of Deities and Demigods that I want, because I would cherish and covet it. Another thing is with the difference between role-playing games and collecting, and where I think that for most people there's a functional part of it, that you end up enjoying something and liking it, and you buy the materials for it, and you have a connection to it, so you want to buy more of it. Even if you're not going to use it, you want to have it, because like you guys were talking about Traveler, you enjoy the system so much, you enjoy the world so much, you enjoy it so much, you just want to have all the materials. So I think that comes into play with people who are collecting role-playing games. When you're talking about other kinds of games, you have definable characters, like, say, Final Fantasy. In computer games, console games, you have characters, and those characters lend themselves to collectability and collectibles. A Dragonborn helm, for instance, for Skyrim, or anime figurines for your favorite anime, things like that. So there is a difference between what can be collectible and why it's collectible in a given hobby. And role-playing is a little weird, in my opinion, for that.
So let's talk about some new things that are going on in technology that kind of makes that a little more accessible, if you will. All right. So I had gotten emails from Hero Forge. Now, Hero Forge is a site that allows you to construct a miniature, and then you can purchase it in metal or plastic, or you can actually download a 3D file and print it if you have a 3D printer. Now, I don't have a 3D printer, but Jimmy does, and John has a different one. So it's something that could happen. So for just a few dollars, I can make a character using their online system, and I can download it, and then I can have it printed. And I was thinking, and it's only a couple dollars, and I thought, well, this would be kind of cool to have little figures of all the characters I play. You know, that would just be kind of neat. And on one hand, I think it would be a way to sort of track your process through, your gaming experience. On the other hand, it's just junk accumulating somewhere. So it's kind of torn, which way do you go? But I think the advent of digital has allowed a lot of things that you wouldn't normally accumulate. So while I have very few gaming supplements in physical form that aren't D&D, I do have a lot that are digital in some form or fashion, because, as Steve is suggesting, you can try things a lot easier by getting them in digital form. You can accumulate them because they seem interesting, and it may be something you don't ever actually use because it's not available or it's not interested to the other people, but it is something that you can use and then, as Steve-O suggests, manipulate for your own purposes. And I think that's kind of an interesting frontier that's, I don't know, probably maybe 10 or 15 years old, really.
Narcissistic collecting. So it's sort of like what Mara was saying, where you have, I just imagine the Star Wars movies, right? So you've got all of these little figurines. You got Leia, she's collectible. You've got like Luke Skywalker, he's collectible. Darth Vader, very collectible. Boba Fett, super collectible. And then you remember those old action figures would have like the one Imperial soldier. So I just imagine those guys who are on the set of those movies going, "Hey, look, I'm a collectible." Like he finally made it. He's the little. And now, from what I'm hearing Frank say, you can be a narcissistic collectible. Nobody else wants this little figurine but me, so I'll have a custom-made one of my little guy at Hero Forge. Oh, that cracks me up. You have your own little collectibles.
Hey, why not, man? I mean, I'm all about it. I mean, if it brings you joy to have your little character made and you put him on the table while you're playing, why not?
Oh, they do that, man. They have ones that you can buy at Hero Forge that have like a base on them that sets on the edge of like the Game Master screen. So you can print them out twice. You print them out once to play on the board, and you print them out a second time with a different base that clips onto the Dungeon Master screen, and he'll put them up on the screen and then use it as like a initiative tracker. So he'll move them around and stuff, or he'll just set them up.
Or like when one dies, he flicks them off.
Flicks it off across the table. Yeah, so I thought that was pretty interesting.
You're dead.
Yeah, so I definitely want to do that. I'm going to print one out for Frank's campaign we're doing now. So
nice.
I'm already with Frank on this. I'm printing one out, and I'm going to put him up in front of the camera since we're doing coronavirus time.
I actually did. I did one. I didn't download or buy it, but I did one for the Bard that we're playing in Andrew's campaign.
Oh, send it to me. I'll print it out.
Well, I have it downloaded. I haven't bought it.
I'll buy it.
Kind of
just send it over.
I designed it on the screen, and I don't think I saved it. I have to redesign it. But I mean, it allows for a lot of different types of collectability, which is kind of neat. Okay, so Steve's already said two things I think that he would love to have, which is the deities and demigods and the old BattleTech technical manuals. So we know his answers. Do you guys have anything that you would like to collect that you don't have? That if you were going to buy something, there's something missing that you really would like to have? Steve-O, I'll let you go first because you've actually sought out Traveler stuff. Is there anything that is missing from that?
Quite frankly, I don't think so. I mean, I have there's some early journals that if I ran across them somewhere, I would buy, but I'm not going to seek it out because I have copies of them in the reprints. So that's good enough for me. There's really nothing other than if something new comes out, I'll probably purchase it, but there's nothing that I can think of that I would really want that my heart desires.
John, and I'm pretty sure the answer there is no.
That would be correct. I really can't think of anything that I'd like to. In fact, I mean, while we've been talking, I actually looked on eBay a little bit to see how much my Mark Miller Traveler book would sell.
I'll buy it
for.
off of you. $350.
As I said, I've got a couple other things, and yeah, man, I don't think I can rationalize keeping it anymore because it's. I guess the way it comes to me is this sort of thing. I'm sorry to kind of interject here on kind of getting off topic with it.
Are you afraid to clutter up your space?
Well, to an extent there, but it ends up being a case of these things, usually collectibles and stuff, have a specific purpose. And for me, having this Mark Miller Traveler hardback book harkens back to when we were like around 16, 18, or at least early 20s, kind of really early 20s age, when we were young and we were doing all sorts of fun, cool stuff and gaming together. And so it makes me remember my friends and everything else. And the thing is, it's been sitting on a shelf for God knows how long since I've probably actually even seen it. I don't need that now. And to tell the truth, if I do see it, I may not even recognize it because, the brain's going, we're getting old, falling apart and stuff. I'd be like, what is that? It scares me. Get it away. It's the other point that I don't really know if I need that anymore.
I agree with John 100%.
So,
don't need it. Why keep it
you don't
around?
need it. How much you want for it?
Exactly. Having said that, how much you want for it?
I still want to keep it. That's a bad thing. You're going back and I'm like, do I want to get rid of it? No, I can't. So yeah, I really have to think about that.
This is equivalent. Yeah, you should quit the game. Can I have your stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah, actually, come to think of it, I want to take all that back. There is something I would like to have, and it's anything with Mega Traveler. I don't have any Mega Traveler stuff.
Really?
Do you, Jimmy? Do you have Mega Traveler?
It's the one Traveler I don't have. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It just turns me off.
What's the one with the virus?
Oh my God, that's 3rd edition.
Okay, yeah.
T3. I have one book out of T3.
That's even worse.
That one doesn't count. Like Jimmy, when he talks about Star Wars and says the prequels don't count, that book doesn't count.
Prequels? What are you talking about? I've never heard of these things. Stupid Star Wars garbage.
Do you have one that you would do, Jim?
No. John's hardback Traveler. I'll take that.
You said the hardback Traveler from earlier.
Yeah, I've got one, but like I said, it looks like it's been filtered through, used as a coffee filter. So, and I'm not even kidding about that. I think they just opened it up and used it as a coaster for a really leaky
has
cup.
A little tear in the slip cover is all it has.
Oh well, it's ruined now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
You may as well throw it out.
Yeah. It's not mint condition.
I'll bring a trash can over. You should just throw it out.
I'd appreciate
Throw it in my trash can. Last but not least. Did we go over Mara? Is Mara?
Yeah, we. Well, Mara has been open. He said
deities
and demigods, and he said the BattleTech books. So, I mean, if there's anything other than that, Steve.
Oh well, every time I go to a yard sale or a thrift store, I'm always looking for 1st edition D&D stuff.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sarah's mom gave me her copy of the box set with and I should have brought it downstairs, with the dragon on the front. The first Dungeons and Dragons box set after the weird nondescript one. So I've got that and I cherish it, but I'm always looking for things like that. I've bought things over time, role-playing related, that I've resold. I resold some Dark Sun stuff, and I'm trying to think what else I've sold. Star Frontiers, maybe a Gamma World. So I always look for that stuff, and I always enjoy finding it. But, pretty much anything from first edition that I don't already have, or AD&D, the monster manuals, Unearthed Arcana, all of that stuff. I would love to have that, but,
not going to go out of your way to get it. You just happen upon it.
No, yeah. And actually, pandemic times kind of made me reevaluate some other things like Magic. I used to, 3-4 times a year, when Wizards of the Coast would have a pre-release, I would go with Kira. And we had a, daddy-daughter thing. And that's kind of been thrown under the bus with pandemic time. But on top of that, my desire to spend any resources on Magic right now has gone down considerably. Magic, far, far more than role-playing, really, you have a physical deck and you sit across a table, and it's very personal in so many ways. And I wonder, if this continues, how Magic is going to maintain as a collectible card game, because there were so many people within Magic who collected certain artists. They collected certain colors, certain sets, certain mechanics, things like that, on top of just getting the cards that they needed to play the game and their decks the way they wanted. So that's going to be interesting. And of course, if I ever see Magic cards at a thrift store, I buy them, because you never know what you're going to get. And sometimes it works out. But I think that, there's some parts of our hobby that are going to suffer, as some parts of our hobby are going to flourish with the way that we've been distancing ourselves. Sorry, as an aside there. Just
thank God it was a short one.
For Steve, it was. Okay, so
nice.
To break with tradition, I'm actually going to answer this question without Jimmy harassing me, because I do have an actual answer for this. I have several answers. I actually wouldn't mind having a copy of Star Frontiers, because it's the first science fiction game I ever played that I remember. Well, Game War was the first, but I actually think I would prefer to have it digital, because I think I don't know that I need the artifact itself, but I would like to have the manuals and look through the picture and the art and stuff like that. And in fact, I remember I got this game a year or two ago that we've not played yet. Was it Dungeon Crawl or something? I can't remember what it is. It's a very thick book, and Jimmy was immediately gravitated towards it because the artwork in it reminded him of first edition, and it does look a lot like first edition D&D, and the rules are set up to be a lot like first edition D&D. But and I think that just having that evocativeness to look through would be awesome. So it doesn't have to be the physical artifact. The digital would be really cool for me. So Star Frontiers is one that came to mind immediately. We didn't talk about this part, but it's the one thing that I do collect pretty obnoxiously, which is dice. I love dice. I love everything about dice. I have a bazillion dice. I will buy a bunch more dice. I enjoy them. If we go to an event where there's dice being sold, I will usually buy a thing of dice to commemorate the event in some form or fashion. I have 2 big bowls of dice. I don't need anywhere near that many dice, but I do collect them and enjoy them, but I don't collect them for, it's like my grandmother's cows type of thing, in the kitchen. It's just something, it's an artifact that I enjoy immensely, which, dice. So
smaller than cows.
Smaller than cows.
Well, I mean, that's the way all of my game stuff is. I don't collect it to be collectible. I collect it because I just want to have it. I mean, I just like looking at it sometimes. I mean, no different than buying your favorite book in a hardback, after you've read it a couple times. I mean, you just want to have it.
Yeah. And then I had a third thing, and I actually lost it in Steve's aside because I can't remember what the heck it was. I thought of it just before he wanted his aside, and then I was paying attention to the aside. But I will say that I can see myself purchasing a lot more role-playing games, partially for this show, but to try different systems. I really do enjoy trying new systems and new thoughts about how to do things. So for its worth and lack thereof, the Serenity role-playing game I very much enjoy because it introduced me to a mechanic I never conceived of, which is the notion that characters can influence the plot. And that was worth the investment in and of itself, even though we've only played it like once or twice and never have played it since. There's a couple that I ran across this week that seem intriguing to me that I would like to try to see if they have an interesting mechanic or an interesting way to think about things. I sent one to the guys in email, the science fiction show. What's the name of that show? I completely blanked on. Altered States.
Altered Carbon.
Altered Carbon, that's it. Altered Carbon, which was a book originally.
Altered States is that really bad movie with what's-his-face.
Yeah.
Hurt.
Right. So Altered Carbon, they're releasing a role-playing game coming out in September. It's available for pre-order. And one of the things that's interesting about that, which would be very great if you're playing in a Steve-O campaign, is that you get a copy of your character that's in a magic computer somewhere. And so when you die, you don't die. You just put it to another.
Oh God, I'm in. I'm in right now. I actually might have a
cheating,
character last
man.
more than
Come
one
on.
game.
That's like resurrection spell in Dungeons and Dragons.
Traveler doesn't have that.
Nobody ever dies.
Yeah, I'm all for that, man.
But
Hey, did you ever think about something? Now, this is an aside. Why would you have an assassin character in Dungeons and Dragons? Okay, you got a guy that trains to be an assassin, and you're presumably is going after some high target, right? Like a nobleman or something like that. Well, obviously, he's going to be rich enough to have somebody resurrect him. So why would you even have assassins in Dungeons and Dragons? Answer me that.
Mic drop.
But don't drink the mic, man. Those are expensive.
I don't know. Well, maybe he just assassinates poor people. Ever thought about that, Steven? Or Steve-O. Sorry, Steven. Steve-O. Yeah, you too, Steven. You ever thought of that?
Yes.
So
Why would you ask something like that and expect the answer to be no?
usually if the answer's no, he makes a weird face like, Can
you assassinate a poor person? Isn't assassination for important people? So are we?
Well, I mean, you would assume.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, if you want to get down to the strictest definition, if I give John a nickel to assassinate you, technically it's an assassination because he paid for it.
Isn't it just like a murder? Doesn't it have to be like an important person at least?
You pay somebody. That's how it's an assassin.
Is that what the definition is?
Yeah, there's a third part. Yeah, I'm inventing that right now. I'm saying that's the definition.
Hey, I'm in.
Yeah.
So poor people, Steve-O. Poor people.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Let's go assassinate some serfs for no profit.
The middle class, basically.
I'm going to train my whole life to become this badass assassin so that I can go kill a peasant working in the field.
The trick is it's the Walmart approach. You just got to get a lot of them. Make a little bit of money on every one of them.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
And then you'll be rich.
I believe if you looked in certain cultures where...
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
But those certain cultures didn't have a resurrection spell, is my point.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist in real life.
All right,
But,
so I think
their belief in an afterlife.
Okay, I think we have stumbled across a
Martyrdom.
topic.
Person. I got to kill myself a shitload of people.
Okay, so I believe we stumbled across a potential future topic, which are weird rules in games that don't make any sense. All right, so if you have any thoughts on collectability, or if you're somebody who collects a lot of games and you want to give us some feedback on why you do it, what you find interesting, feel free to contact us at the contact information. It's coming along in a minute. Thank you.
That's all for this week. Thanks for spending some of your precious time with us. If you like the show, please do us a favor by taking a minute to rate and review wherever you listen to our podcast. Visit our website at roleplaygeeks.com, where you can find all of our social media links. Finally, feel free to email us at roleplaygeeks@roleplaygeeks.com with any questions or topics you would like to suggest. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.